Please join me in welcoming Professor Leda Maria Martins.
Boa noite. Boa noite, não, boa tarde, né? Boa tarde. Boa tarde. Good afternoon. Good afternoon or good evening? Which one? So good afternoon, people. Well, a little bit more. Good afternoon. You are tired, eh? You are tired. Well, first of all, I want to thank you, all the organizers of this beautiful event, and particularly Luigi, Anna, and Blanca that has been talking to me for the last month, and are very kind and generous, as you heard one of them. So thank you for all your generosity. Thank you for all your generosity. It has been a pleasure to be talking to you and now to be here with you. Thank you very much. And also to say thanks for all the organization and also to you that stay here till late. And now it's already late after 2 intensive days. People, my language, we are talking about language. I heard the last panel, it was very interesting. About languages also. My language, the language I have more comfort is not English. So I have to excuse myself because you have to do a lot of effort to understand me. But it's my, you see, I usually don't speak in English. So when you don't use the language, you kind of forget it, right? So I'm sorry for that because it's a beautiful language. Though it's a language of the colonized, but Portuguese also is the language of the colonized. So I should speak Quimbundo or maybe Tupi-Guarani, right? But, okay. I was talking to Luis that the theme is very hard for a cold afternoon. It's very hard, because it's very complex. So we'll talk a little bit, we go until we can, and then we open for questions, right? And I hope when the book comes, you buy the book. But you can buy it in Portuguese. Okay. So since yesterday, the time is coming around the panels. Did you sense that? Many of the people that were here were talking about different kind of feelings of time. But usually when you think about time, when you use this word time, what comes to our minds? Day, hours, past, age, what else? Huh? Structure? Oh, explain it. How our experience is measured. Because we are controlled by time, right? Or at least by the instruments that try to measure time, particularly in the Western civilizations, right? You know that when they first created the clock of sun clock, you say sun clock, in Rome, in ancient Rome, people didn't like it. You can imagine why not, right? Because from that moment on, all their movements were controlled. So our experience of time usually it's an experience with the Western concept of time. You see, everything you said has to do with Western experience of time. Usually, we don't realize that other people, other civilizations, we're talking here about today Yanomami, right? Do you think they have the same experience? They count time in the same way the Westerns do? No. No. It's completely different. But you see, when you ask about the experience of time, the word time, what comes to us is our Western experience. Why? Because we're talking about the knowledge of the ones that had colonized the Americas. One of them. Maybe the ones that had more power and has been here for 500 years, right? But it's interesting because other people, other civilizations had different notions and concepts of time. That's what we're going to talk a little bit today. So, to talk about that, let's go back a little bit. 500 years ago, come to me to the Atlantic Ocean, and come to me to a vessel, you say vessel? Ship. Vessel. To a vessel. What do you see? Did you ever thought about that? One of the images that was true, men of black people, naked, right? In a long journey from Africa to the Americas. These people were naked, but at the same time, they brought many of their thoughts and knowledges to the Americas. How come? So, at the same time, they were naked, they were without clothes, but they were not naked because they were dressed with the knowledge of their people, right? And how come? There was no computer, no laptop, no cellular, no books with them. So people, how were they able to bring their knowledge with them? Let me tell you something. Diana Taylor, in her book, The Repertoire and the Archive, she tells a story, very interesting. She recounts a story that is in a book of a priest, a Spanish priest. He was describing his experience with the Azteca, with the Mexicans, and he would say, you see, we had prohibited them to chant, we had destroyed all their pyramids, we had destroyed all their towns, and still these people do not forget. They continue practicing their religions. Why? How come? How come? So let's go back to the slaves. How come these people in that condition, and also here the Aztecas and the other indigenous people, how could they keep their knowledge. And we're talking about many kinds of knowledge. Scientific knowledge, artistic knowledge, metaphysical knowledge, and also philosophical knowledge. How come? You know.
Oral traditions.
Oral traditions, embodied knowledge. And see, you have at least two great examples. Be them with the Africans that were brought to the Americas, be them with the indigenous people that were able, both of these people were able to keep their history, their knowledge, their epistemology through the body. So what our thinking is that body is the place where knowledge is inscribing, right? It's a place to inscribe knowledge, to create knowledge, to disseminate knowledge, and etc., etc., etc. Why it's important to stress that? Because we all know that during the colonial times, during slavery, one of the tools that were used by the colonized to dehumanize and to disqualify the black people and the indigenous people were what? These people did not have the literacy, right? So, the European modernity is based in some kinds of relationships. Reason, it's what order everything, right? In the European modernity. In the writing, it's an expression of reason. So Hegel would say, African people could not have a civilization because they did not have writing. That was not true, because Africa knew many kinds of writings all over the millenniums. Europe still wasn't born, and Africa was already old. Some of the most complex and sophisticated system of writings were generated in Africa. But what the modernity, the European modernity of the colonized would say, and you can only read the philosophy, because usually you like all these people. We like to read Hegel. I do myself, right? But sometimes you come to some phrase that you want to, whoa. But writing would be the expression of logic and of reason. So what they did, first of all, even people that had some kind of writings, as in Mexico, right? They would take fire in all these codes. But even with these people that are obliged to speak the European languages, and language is thought, right? To pray for their gods, to have their way of living and of thinking, even though these people, be them the black people and the indigenous people, were oppressed by the conquerors or by the colonizers, they did not forget. Let's think that, let's remember that to colonize, it's to make forget. It's to create forgetfulness. That's why the colonizer tried to erase all the knowledge the people that are colonized present to them. So, besides, what I'm stressing in this book that I told you is that through the embodied knowledge, one of the most complex and sophisticated conception and notion, that's a philosophical notion. I was listening to the discussion here. We use or not to use cosmovision, philosophy, but we are using English, right? So tell me, unless we use Tupi-Guarani or a Sioux language, or a Kimbundo, or a Umbundo, or a Yoruba language, huh? Okay. So, I explore in this book the interrelationship between body, time, performance, memory, and the production of knowledge, especially those which implement themselves through embodied practices. The idea is that the experience and the philosophical comprehension of time can also be expressed through an inscription that is not necessarily discursive, not even narrative, though no less meaningful and efficient because of this. There is a language constituted by the body in performance, by the living body that in and of itself establishes and presents a cosmic, ontological, theoretical, and also quotidian notion of temporal apprehension and comprehension. So, ultimately, what I propose is an epistemological possibility. As an epistemological possibility is the idea that in certain cultures, time is the location of inscriptions of a knowledge graphed through gesture, movement, and choreography, on the surface also of the skin, as well as in the rhythms and timbres of vocality. These knowledges are thus framed by a specific cosmo-perception. You see, it's also cosmo, but not cosmovision. Cosmo-perception. And then later we can say, why not cosmovision? Parenthesis. Why? I use more cosmo-perception than cosmovision. Because we don't realize, but when you think about time, we think in European ways of thinking about time. Also, we do not realize that we also think about the cosmos, about everything, through the eyes of the European. Let's remember, in the European philosophy, what do they say? The eyes is what? It's the windows for knowledge. The vision is the window for knowledge. That's interesting because if you realize most of the term we use to translate knowledge, it comes to this sense that knowledge is apprehended by vision, right? Just think about that. So, but in other cultures, listening is as important as seeing. You that heard a lot about the indigenous people here yesterday and today, how do they create knowledge? Usually by chanting and listening the chantings that comes in the dreams. So as important as the eyes, to, on a way to envision knowledge in the cosmos, also it's important the hearing. For some for some societies, maybe even more important than see is to hear. Some philosophers will say that Africa is the continent of the hearing, also as it is the continent of dancing. Thompson would say that Africa creates a new history of art, a history of dancing art. But dancing, it's not only entertainment. Chanting, it's not only entertainment. It's also dancing and chanting windows for knowledge, for creating knowledge, and for interpreting knowledge. So, as I was saying, cosmo-perception. So, people, the spiral time, it's based, it kind of forms a kind of a tripé, let's say maybe a triangle, because it's based in one notion, that's the notion of ancestrality, how it is understood for many of the African people that were brought to the Americas, the notion of the sacrality of life. I will come to these terms in a little bit. So before, to try to make a comparison, or to remember, in Western society, in Western narrative, time has a father, Chronos, the deity Chronos. That's why everything that has to do with time, it's chronosophy, chronology, right? Brings Chronos, has a deity. Chronos established an ordered, consecutive, measurable, and progressive idea and ideal of temporality. If we go back to the mythology, the Greek mythology, particularly in Isildur, we find there, and that's a beautiful narrative, how Chronos, could you say, how Chronos is the father of this kind of chronology. Chronos in the West inaugurates a certain idea of calendar temporality, instituting a linearity in a progressive lineage of substitutions and power that instill and implement themselves simultaneously with the very fixation and separation of the ideas of past, present, and future. It's interesting, because when we study about time, what we realize is that also the time is an idea. It's a construction, right? And each civilization, you have its means to formulate its ideas about it. So, Chronos, in Greek mythology, is the time of severance, the time that divides itself into now and before, into today and tomorrow, instants and becomings, completely separated from each other. Chronos, the father of time, imposes his tyranny on the West. The notion of time that expresses itself through succession, substitution, and through direction whose horizon is the future, marks Western theory about time and modernity's very idea of progress and reason, even though the lived and individual experience of temporality are problematized and argued by many philosophers from the same West. According to Reis, one of Brazilian's philosophers, the history of philosophy always had time as a theme, from Parmenides, Plato, Aristotle, Plotinus, St. Augustine, St. Thomas, Leibniz, Kant, Hegel, Marx, Husserl, Heidegger, Bergson, Bachelard, etc., etc., etc. Legions of thinkers. But the paradigm is always the same. Time is ordered in the logic of succession. That is, through instants, days, cycles, events, or happenings. The very idea of Gerais in Bergson would not fully escape this linear consecutive idea or logic of progression. While in the images that designate time, the most graphically common one in the Western is the arrow that drives itself to the inexorability of the end and origin. It's interesting, during the pandemic, many people were afraid that we were living the end of the world. But why? Because that's the image that condensates, synthesizes the development of time in the Western. Time that has a beginning, a middle, a development, and an end. And the end is usually catastrophic, apocalyptic. Have you imagined that? So every time we have something that brings a huge kind of suffering, of disturbance, what do the Westerns, that were taught in the Western thought think? There is the end of the world. Why? Because the arrow always translates this idea that times go always in the direction of a future that's not linked to the past, but is the way we will end. The another image is of the river. The idea that you cannot drink of the same water twice, because the river would not be the same, neither we would be the same. So the principal idea here it's that there is no reversibility. Reversibility would be impossible. So, before, during, present, past, future, instant, now, yesterday, today, becoming, duration, repetition, succession, eternity, conscience, nature. Those are temporal relations in this conception of time. Bose, one Brazilian intellectual, states that each moment that occurs in the death certificates of what is already gone, living only in this sequence of time, the adjacence, imminence of the body struggling for survival. Well, we could go on in all the philosophy to synthesize how this idea of time, raciality, succession is expressed in the philosophy. But our time do not permit us to do that. So, but in other civilizations that usually we do not learn about them in the course of philosophy or in the course of history. Other civilizations have developed other ways of thinking about time. And usually, it is interesting. I was reading a book that I like very much that was not organized, it was organized by UNESCO, and it's called Cultures and Time. And this book was, the preface, the introduction was written by Paul Ricoeur. Paul Ricoeur, one philosopher of our time that has many books written about time. And Ricoeur was astonished because in that book, UNESCO was bringing to us reflections, studies in the concept of time completely different from the notion of time in the Western civilization. So, and you see, Ricoeur, the minimum can say that how perplexed he was to be confronted with so many other cultures and civilizations that think in time in many other ways. Wow. One of the things that Western civilization would say is that time can be expressed only by a discourse, only by the writing, only by writing narratives. But even, I'm not going to stress that idea, but even the Western, there are some kinds of action that disrupt these ideas of time as going successfully. Poetry. Poetry, maybe, it's one of dissident of the way even the Western encounters some dissidents, because in the realm of poetry, retrospection, retrieving, it's possible. Okay, but we're not going to talk about poetry, so come, let's go. Wow, so, also, what I'm imposing that discourse is not the only way to elaborate about time. Through oralituras, oralituras is a name that I have been used for many decades to address the embodied practice. So instead of say oralitura, oralidade, I've been saying oralitura, oraliture, that kinds to translate the way the body practices, inscribe knowledge, all kinds of knowledge, even a knowledge so complex and so sophisticated has a knowledge about a time. So, what I'm proposing also is that the idea of time, for more complex and sophisticated that it is, it can also be expressed by the body in performances. So, and I think that that is our more difficult understanding. That was challenges us more. Maybe not only the notion of time as a spiral, but as this very complex notion, we're able to travel from Africa to the Americas and be reimplanted, reterritorialized in the Americas through body knowledge, to body practice. That's our challenge. Because usually, it's easy to talk about embodied knowledge. The body has a place to, in an ambience to inscribe knowledge. But how that really happens, that's what challenges us. And also because when you think about the indigenous civilizations out the Americas, out through the Americas, they also experienced time as a spiral, not as a linear arrow. So what for me it's interesting is that what makes the foundation to the idea of the existence of time, not that runs to a future, but also realizes itself curving to the past and curving to the future simultaneously. What bases the idea of a synchronic image of something that puts together what the Western called past, present, and future? What's the foundation for that? But you see, when I was hearing the panel that came before us, it was very interesting because one of the expositors was reading something about the, not the Machacali, the Yanomami, Copenhagen, right? I was reading something about, did you understand what he was saying? Probably not. Probably you did not understand anything at all. What Copenhagen was saying there. Because it comes from another logic. Not the same logic we are used to. I was paying attention and I was saying, I doubt if anybody understood, even the one that was reading. Because that demands a torsion of our mind. Or what Ngugi Wa Thong had said, we have to decolonize our mind. Because it's not comparable. What Copenhagen was saying there, to understand it, we do have to decolonize our minds. Because the Western cannot translate that knowledge. But it's not only the question of the language. It's a question of the whole way of functioning of the mind. The same as say about the spiral time. We do have to decolonize our mind. To make a torsion to our ways or understand. Why? First of all, the foundation of the idea of spiraling is the ancestor, the ancestrality. That's a structure and a concept. What is the ancestrality? It's not only the praise of the ancestor that has already died, because that everybody does, every civilization does. But it's the idea that the ancestor does not disappear. Because nothing disappears forever. Everything and everybody experiences transformation. And transformation is necessary for the continuity continuity of existence. So, in this idea, now very synthesized, very pobremente, by me now, it means that instead of thinking about the one that dies as someone that stays in a limbo, waiting for the resurrection, right? That you come in the end of times, the way of thinking of African traditional way of thinking would say that the ones that died continue to exist. But they do not exist only as a desire. No, actually, they continue to exist. How come? See, when I say we do have to open our mind, because if you think with the thoughts, we are usually, you think these people are just crazy, right? Though by the idea is that the ancestor inhabits not the past, not the future, and not the present as separated things. Because in the idea of ancestrality, there is no separation, no gaps in between past, present, and future. The one that dies and the one or what dies, for instance, it continues to exist in a time that is not already fulfilled. What means that present is not just a gap in between something that was and something that would still come. Present is constituted at the same time by past, present, and future at the same time. And past is constituted by present, future, and past. And future is also constituted by future, past, and present. It's difficult, right? That's why I say, if you go to other cultures, to other societies, we'll see that not only the European people are able to think and to create knowledge, other people, other civilizations also. And those thoughts are so complex that they need, maybe, I've been studying 22 years to try to start to understand what ancestrality really means. Because it carries with it another notion that I call the ecology of ancestrality. Because all this way of thinking tell us what? It carries the idea that everything is sacred. So sacrality, it's not a realm of religion. So, as time links what we call present, past, and future, at the same time, in the ambience of ancestrality, there is another principle that is very important, complementarity. It means that there is no present that it's not complemented by past and by future. There is no past that is not complemented by present and future and past. And there is no future that is not complemented for past and present. What means that? Temporality, think as something that is not done, that's not accomplished in a totality, that's always in process of being. And also is everything in life. So, that's why in this kind of thinking, there is no separation in between anything that we call nature. As important as the human beings are the birds, the water, the trees, the stones. Everything has the same importance. Because in this idea, in space of complementarity, we do not exist. Anything can exist without the other thing. What means that the human being is it's not a priority in nature. First of all, there is no nature there and the human beings here. We are nature. And unless we think about ourselves as that, we do not comprehend nature. There is no nature outside us, and we here. We are part of the cosmos in the same degree of necessity and of importance as one small insect. So, that's why, first of all, we are not separated from what the humans call nature. We are part of it. And in nature, the principle of complementarity also exists. It means that everything we do has consequences. So now, you see, all these thoughts about ecology that you have nowadays in the Western, all these ancient civilizations has this kind of thought millennia ago. So that's why I'm going to read for you one piece of a beautiful philosopher from Congo called Fukiao Bonseki, when he says, why are we sacred? Because everything in nature is sacred, and everything is linked. So, let's put together ancestrality. 5 minutes, okay. Let's put together. So before I run, let me read this for you. That's very beautiful. So, one thing more. Ancestrality, it's linked to the sacrality of life, But what makes life sacred? Something that makes the existence possible. For the people of Yoruba people, they would call it Axé. For people as from Bantu tradition, as myself, we call it the força vital, the vital force, the vital energy. So, vital energy, or Axé, that's what gives existence the possibility of being. That's why what makes time so important? Only because it's in time, as a spiral, that the vital energy keeps the cosmos going on. It's the force, the vital force that is in everything that makes possible the existence, not life, existence to be. See? And the ancestor, that's because I said not only life, but existence. Because the ancestor dies, but not his vital force that has to be distributed for us to be able to still exist. So you see, the ancestor, it's also a vital energy, as is time, as is life. So, people, that's why in this arcade, the Axé cannot only be thinking about a force that goes straight to the future or to an ending. It ours in terms of a revolution. So, and it means that also to exist, it needs duration. Duration. Pause. You see, the idea, let's try to design in an image. The idea, it's not that you only walk or run forward. The idea is that you, at the same time, you have to go forward, but you have to go back. So it means that you have to have duration. The possibility of de duração, me ajudem? Duração? Duration. Contemplation. Rest. Not escape, no. Escape it's what we need in this huge control of our time, of our life. No, it's not escape. Huh? So, let me, just to finish, read something for you. Then, in the ancestral Africa conception and ontology, a channel of vital force includes in the same phenomenological circuit, the deities. That's why we're not separated from the deities. The deities always be with us. The deities, the cosmic nature, the fauna, the flora, the physical elements, the dead, the living, and also those that are still to be born. All exists together. You see, isn't that interesting? It means that you do not cut a tree unless you do need of that wood for something that you cannot have in another way. Because that tree carries also vital energy. To cut it, you have to plant 3 others to compensate, right? And this is with everything. With everything. So, people, that, see how beautiful it is also? That tree, it brings together the present, the past of that tree, and also the trees to be born. They are all there. So if you cut that tree, you cut what? The possibility of existence. So, in this kind of thinking, that's in this kind of realm that anchors the idea of time as a spiral. So, one more minute. What are the main principles that is based the idea of the spiral in time? Besides this idea of the synchronity of everything. First, the idea of synesy. The idea of a time that is that's movement, but a dynamic movement. But this dynamic movement, it's with the same strength, goes forth and goes back. So it means, it is a kind of determination? No. Because, you see, there are, of course, repetition, but not a repetition of the same. Because even time, it's a result of what we, when I say we, and we all do to ourselves in connection with our surroundings. Second principle, transformation. In the principle of the spiral in time, everything has to transform. If you do have this kind of synchronic existence, it means that we do have to learn how to live with death. Because the death is necessary, the good death. Not the death of the violence. Let's see, the natural death. Why? Because otherwise the planet cannot sustain life and existence. So everything has to transform. We have to transform through death. The tree has to transform to give place for another tree, right? Also the human being, so transformation. But nothing disappears. You see? Because as vital energy, everything is still is. So, synesy, transformation, and the idea that for me it's one of the most beautiful ones. That's in the idea of the complementation. This in the realm of spiral time, this time that curves backwards and forwards, present demands future and past. Past demands. Past is not gone there. It's not a deposit that is there. It's here. So it demands to exist the present, the future, and also the past, and also the future. You see? To exist, it depends on the complementarity of past and of present. That's it, my people. So, in the curves of ancestrality, time as a role stresses itself backward and forward, avoiding the conquest of forgetfulness. It challenges the serial, progressive, and linear line of Western history. It disrupts it. It challenges Western desire to colonize the minds of African and indigenous people. Since colonial times to actual surroundings, Western colonization has had to face other knowledges and cosmos experiences and perceptions that imbalance, disturb, and confront their desire of totality and of universality. As a force for existence that exceeds our challenge, that make us not be able to die, as is said for Foucault. That this is what Congo cosmology taught me. I am going back and forth, being around the center of life forces. I am because I have been and have-been before, and so I will be and re-be again. Thank you.
Does anyone has questions?
Please, people. All the section had questions. You're going to let me without questions?
So
No?
I can start. So,
you see, she told me, I'm going to prepare some questions, because if people do not ask you, I will, and she did.
I was actually shaking because I haven't eaten because I was like writing my questions. But yeah, I have many, and thank you for this wonderful presentation. I think my first question is, how did you come up with spiral, this image of spiral time? Because I think that everything that defies like this interpretation of time as a linear progression is called like atemporal, out of time. We have transtemporal, or as a ghost, right? Something that disrupts the present, that is not part of the present, but is like a ghostly matter or a hunting presence. And I was wondering, how did you come up with spiral, like this image?
You see, do all these decades studying oralitura, and one thing that I did realize when I was writing one of my books called Afrographies of Memories, one thing that I did realize is that all the dancing in the black dances, particular ones in the South American, Latin American, the black dances start with a movement. Can you see the picture? How do I do it? Huh? It's interesting because even if you go to... Não, pode deixar. If you go to any kind, those are African dances. In my video that it didn't work, I was going to show you how we do the same. You see? The first movement, did you realize the first movement he did? This is in Brazil. That is in Africa. So beautiful, isn't it? People, why the first movement of the dancing is anti-horário? It's in the direction of the ancestor. See? And then I was, as you see, the first, like, insight I had was that, there is something in the dancing body that inscribing what also is the spiral time. So I would see, I start researching, and what I thought, I could learn, not only observing, but with the oldest ones that in the communities, even in the music, in dancing, in music, in everything that it is done in the black communities, the traditional black communities, it's a ways of inscribing these different kinds of experiencing time. So that's why I said it's not only right, and also the oral traditions, right? And in the book, of course, I take like almost 200 pages to try to give to the lecture how the spiral time manifests itself, because it's in everything. For instance, let's give an example in jazz, in the old jazz. What do you have? You have a theme, right? You have that theme that's posed. And then you have the improvisation. The improvisation, there's the spirals. It goes, 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 and then come back to the theme. In everything, in all kinds of technologies, this kind of conception of the cosmos, because it's not only a conception that only has the person as the center. The center all the time is the cosmos. So spiral time, you see, has something interesting. The physics, the theories of physics, usually say that it's important the reversibility. And the spiral time is based on the idea of everything is reversible, of reversibility. So it's possible to live the same thing twice. But it's interesting because even in physics, when the physics goes to the cones that are in the universe, inside the cones, the time it's reversible. See. So it's in a way, if you think about the galaxies, think about the Big Bang, think all the movement of the universe It's not, it's interesting. In lines, retas, the movement is a spiral. So besides this idea of the ancestrality, no? But you see, one example that you see that when I said, we have to give a place in our mind for other kinds of knowledge. So to be able to embrace those as possibilities. For instance, when you look at the sky at night, what do you see? You see the ancestors of the stars, because you are seeing lights of a star that has been dead for millions of years, but it's still present. You see? When you look at the sky, you see now, today, something that is dead for millennia. So in the spiraling of cosmos, everything goes but comes back. See? Yes?
Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask, I feel that academia has also this very structured division of time. So tenure tracks, bachelor, master's, PhD, all of that very linear sense, and that structures people's lives. So I was wondering how you not only write and think about this conception of time, but how do you feel you personally embody that? Is there like an ethics? Is there a praxis of how you relate in your writing and your thinking to this spiral conception of time?
You see, that's interesting because Baba says in one of his books that when you think about the nations, you have what you can call the pedagogical nations and the performative nations. The pedagogical nation, it's what you call the United States of America or Brazil, right? But inside these nations, you have other nations, the performative ones. So inside the Republic of the United States, you have many other nations. You still have the native nations. You have some other black communities also with real other nations. The same in Brazil. You have other languages. In Brazil, for instance, you have at least more than 200 indigenous languages still spoken today. Live languages. We have at least 5 or 6 or 7 African languages spoken today. Kimbundu, Umbundu, Yorubas, etc. So besides the pedagogical, what Baba called the pedagogical nation, there are so many other nations. Those knowledges, fortunately to us, did not disappear. What I say is that let's not think about purity, right? But at least in Brazil, we do have many forms of recreating African ways of living, of thinking, of recreating in daily basis inside the capitalist society, all the kinds of living. So when you think about, for instance, you here were presented about the indigenous people. You see, something is very interesting when I see, because even art, neither in the indigenous people, in their communities, neither in the black communities, art is not think about as a monetary thing. Art is not separated from the ones of the community. So it's very shocking to see art in the museums or in an exposition. Let's not forget, or as belle. Huh? You see, because in the community, for instance, in the Congado community, where I'm not from Candomblé, I'm not of the Yoruba tradition, I'm from Bantu tradition. Bantu do not have orixá, but you have our other ways of praising. But then, for instance, what is art? Even the word in some languages, in the indigenous language and the African, did not have this word. Not the word for art, not the word for aesthetic. Because what is art? Art, the object, only would be called bello, beautiful, or something else that you want to put in him, if it's how to say bem? A good for the community. You see? What makes it art, what makes it valuable, what makes it valuable for the community, not his monetary value. This is an ethic. This is an ethic of the collective, not the individual. So you not praise the individual. You always praise the collective. So I've been in the Congados community since I was very young. But even for those that do not live in an indigenous community or in a black community, you see, Ngug has been saying this for more than 30 years. We do have first to decolonize our minds. So, you can also fulfill our thoughts. We can create our courses at the university, as the colleges, as the secondary schools. Since our kids are very young and go to the schools, we can give them the possibility of being able to learn other knowledges. Let me tell you another example. One of the indigenous professors said once, why it is necessary to have indigenous professors? One, that means that they are not going, the children, the indigenous children, the kids, they are not going to study mathematics. No, they are going to study mathematics. Huh? But as this professor of Pataxó, ethnic, said once, when you go to the school of the whites, what is the first arithmetic operation you learn? Addition. In the school of the aldeia, what will be the first operation the indigenous kids will learn? Division. You see? You don't have to be determined in a place, a part of everything. Only do, I was listening here the discussion about decolonizing this, decolonizing that, but decolonizing the mind, for me, it's the most important. It means not only realize the existence of the authority, but to open your minds for that possibility of that existence. That's why when I said that when the girl was beautifully presenting her exposition, she was reading some words of Schopenhauer, and I said, probably you do not understand what he's saying, because we still did not open our minds for that another kind of logic. It's one better than the other, I do not know. But that's not the principle. The principle is that We are used to think that there is something as universal. There is not the universal. Everything is contingental, right? So, many of us, a lot of us, are talking about the indigenous people today because it seems to be a mode. Moda? Huh? Trend? Trend? A trend. But it's not a trend. It's not a trend. And it's not exotic. You see, exotic means what is out of my vision. Because since I capture knowledge through the vision, exotic is what is out of my capability of understanding that. We are not exotic. The indigenous people are not exotic. It means that we do have to open ourselves, not to bring them as exotic or as strange, but to bring them as people of knowledge, even though we do not understand that knowledge. For instance, the idea of time that is not measured by the relógio, by the clocks. You see, it has been a way of resistance of black people all over the Americas to resist through not doing things in the velocity that the system think you are supposed to do. That's why they are called, we have been called preguiçosos, lazy. Right? And see, there is a lot of forms of resistance. And you have been resisting. For instance, in my book, they took here in the United States one of the chapters out. The one with, I talk about the Machacali, with whom I had for years, some kind of convivence because I was very friendly with Toninho Machacali, who was a pajé. The Machacali can sing for 24 hours straight. What time is that? It's not the serial time. It's not the progressive time, right? You don't measure that. And you ask them, how long has it been? They do not know. Because it doesn't measure in terms of the calendar. It imagines another kind, because it's through the singing that you remember the ancestor. That's why then it makes it possible for you at night to dream with the visions that during the day you have to transform in chants, and then you preserve the memory of the ones that apparently has already gone. That's why, for instance, in the Machacali, they design for insects that they did not had actual convivence with them. For instance, let's see in the Machacali, that they live in the continental areas of Brazil, and then they were pushed to the interior. Most of them live in terras secas. There is no food, there is no water, there is no nature, etc., etc. But they still remember the Atlantic forest as it was 500 years ago. They design insects that had already disappeared. How come? How come the memory? So the memory, what makes life possible, the existence possible, memory brings together knowledge, is the chant. So they sing for 24, 30 hours without stopping. You see? It's another kind of way of experiencing life. It's another way, you see? And so I usually, what I have learned of these many decades of doing field research, listen to the old ones, but also reading. And because some of the philosophers, African philosophers would write in Brazil also. But what I was going to see, I forgot. But what I would say is that, for instance, we had the idea that we do things for the ancestors, right? Let's say, we do not forget the ancestors. So you sing, you dance, so they would be alive. Oh. My hypothesis is that we do have to sing and dance for the ancestors not to forget us. Because when they forget us, then we will not exist anymore. You see, that's what kind of knowledge this other cosmo-perception brings to us. Maybe that's what the world needs. You are living the collapses, the ruins of Western civilization. Right? But existence is still possible. That's why when I said that probably we did not know what Schopenhauer was saying. Because those words need us to dream on them. To dream on them. Not only read them, but to dream on them. Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone so much for these past 2 days. I think that borrowing from Leda's amazing lecture, we can understand what we've done here as art, because it's good for the community. Thank you to the wonderful ISLAA team, to the amazing AV crew, to the fantastic organizers, loving presenters, and really crowded audience. Thank you for your time, care, and attention. I know those are scarce resources today. So thank you so much. I just wanted to remind all of the grad students in the audience that tomorrow is the deadline for the current ISLAA research grant. So if anyone wants to apply for that, that's a grant to support research to conduct, a grant to support research anywhere in the world for grad students anywhere in the world to work on their dissertations and theses. So the deadline is coming up tomorrow. I encourage you all to apply, and this happens twice a year. So if you can't make it for tomorrow, there's another call coming up in September. Thank you. I hope that everyone has a very restful Sunday. Thank you.
To sing. Cinco. No tempo, corpo, bailarina, bailarina, bailarina. No corpo, tempo, expirá-la, expirá-la, expirá-la. No cosmos, tudo baila, revoa, remoinha, remoinha, remoinha. Agora vocês. No tempo, corpo, bailarina. Vamos lá? No tempo, corpo, bailarina, bailarina, bailarina. No corpo, tempo, espirala. Vamos lá, gente. No corpo, tempo, espirala. 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 No cosmos, no cosmos, no cosmos, tudo baila, revoa, remoinha, remoinha, oh, remoinha, vamos, gente, remoinha, vamos, remoinha, ops, remoinha, remoinha,